Alright, this is an Elna SP. I am changing the zigzag gear on it because the zigzag gear is broken. It's a plastic gear, and I am following instructions from one of the other YouTube sewing machine channels that I do. And I've watched several videos on it, and they all describe how to get... There's a screw in here that you need to get your screwdriver on, and that screw is underneath an arm with this little retainer screw in it and a spring. And all the videos mention removing the spring, but they don't mention you need to loosen this retainer screw until the arm that it's on moves out of the way and you can actually get a screwdriver in to the screw head underneath it. Alright. This is the cam stack mechanism out of the Elna. Here's the cam. Here's the old gear that came off the bottom. There are a bunch of washers on that gear underneath here. So you need to make sure you find all those. You see all the teeth were ground off of it. And once the gear is off, the cam stack just pops out of the top of this here. So I pulled it out. There's a dip and a reservoir here, and there's a reservoir visible inside the cam stack here that should be filled with grease. So I'm gonna take a Q-tip and put fresh grease in that little reservoir before I slip this back in place, and put all the washers back in place and pin the new gear on, because that pin, or that gear, is pinned on with a roll pin. But here is the little thing that gets in the way of right where my finger is. Right. The last screw to hold this mechanism in is blocked by this lever that swings way out of the way here, and it has this pin in it that screws down in and sets in this hole and prevents it from getting out of the way. So when you go to remove it, that's what I was trying to show earlier, is you got to unscrew this detention pin, and then this bar will come out of the way, and it has this spring on it normally, and that's why that detent screw is in there, so that it will not fly completely out of the way. But the other thing is removing this. This is the drive gear, and it's got this pin is a 2mm hex drive, and you tighten it down in, and you can see the set screw comes out to engage the drive for that worm gear. So you have to loosen it just enough for the worm gear to spin, but this was glued in place with all the old residue, and it still doesn't slide onto the shaft very easily. I have to wipe the inside of it, clean the inside with alcohol. I'm going to give this shaft a real quick polish with really fine wet and dry sandpaper to get any little burrs off of it, and that way we'll be able to get this gear back in place more easily. Same thing for the bearing in the front of the machine. The head bearing of the machine is in the front of the casting. I'm going to take some Q-tips and clean that with rubbing alcohol. And then I have to go looking for all of the bits of this gear that have ground off and gone missing. Some of them were actually up flapping around inside this mechanism, and if they get in the wrong spot, of course, they could get jammed in some of the fine points of this mechanism, so I had to go looking for plastic bits off of the gear in there. So hopefully I'll be able to finish cleaning this and reassemble it. Alright, cleaned up the shaft. I have the new gear on the bottom of the cam stack here, and I put grease in the reservoir underneath here, and I'm setting it in place. And there is a machined recess in the body of the machine, and that is what gives this whole system, that machined recess, that shaft. When you get this in here, you gotta wiggle it until that shaft pops into the recess, and then it rotates like so until you get the 3 screws in. And then there's another couple tiny pieces that I almost lost one. This is the end of this rod here, which does the zigzag on motion, and it has a slot, and in that slot goes this adjusting cam that looks like a tiny screw and goes up from underneath the arm. And when I took this arm out, this cam was stuck in the arm and it fell out later, and I had to go looking for it. And then there's this screw here that retains that whole thing. And the reason this had to come off is because to get it in place, you have to slip it up inside to hook on the back side of this mechanism after the mechanism is in place. So I'm gonna, because this end has to go up on this pin here, so it has to go up in like that and then get rotated around and set in place. And I just dropped it through the body of the machine to underneath, so I'm gonna grab that and fiddle with that and get it back in place. Alright, we got this back together, and there are 2 major adjustments. First, this is the drive gear, well, 3 adjustments, I guess. This is the drive gear that meshes with the new plastic gear on the bottom of the cam stack. The 3 screws that hold the cam stack also allow it to move to mesh with this worm gear. So you put those gears in loose, or those screws in loose, and then you push the cam stack gear against this worm gear until it is snug. Not tight, just, you know, kind of push it over there and then tighten these screws down. And then to adjust the timing of the cam stack, you got to use, there's the back side of the pin, that 2mm hex. You got to reach in there, loosen it, rotate this gear, tighten it, check to make sure you've got your proper needle travel, so it's not so it's end-shaped instead of a pendulum where it goes down, tries to sweep while it's in the needle plate and then comes up. And then the other adjustment is the needle travel, and that is this cam and set screw for the needle position. So when you put everything back in right away, you need to check your needle position, and if it's striking the needle plate, you loosen the set screw, and then that little cam screw gets rotated until your needle's centered properly, and then you tighten it.